What is Iran's most potent weapon? Is it the Shahed drones that have driven up the cost of war for the US and Israel? Or the growing arsenal of more advanced missiles that were hidden from the world? The answer might surprise you. It's neither of these. Iran's true strength lies in a single narrow waterway, the Strait of Hormuz. And recent events may have revealed just how easily they could exploit this power. As global economies fell into chaos due to disruptions by Iran in the strait, Trump repeatedly called, almost desperately, for it to be reopened. He even went further by threatening to decimate an entire civilization. Meanwhile, Iran didn't respond with escalation, but with quiet confidence. It had come to understand that even without nuclear weapons, its position alone in the strait is enough to make any adversary think twice before striking. It eventually became clear to the country that keeping control of the strait could be extremely profitable, with passage fees climbing as high as $2 million per ship. They've even used it as leverage, favoring countries that have resisted US pressure on their soil. Spain, for instance, was allowed passage after taking a firm stance against the use of its Rota and Moron bases by the US. But how did this narrow stretch of water become Iran's most powerful weapon? And the reason comes down to one simple factor: geography. The northern coastline of the strait belongs almost entirely to Iran. It seemed like luck was on this nation's side when this terrain was sculpted millions of years ago. The coastline isn't flat. Rather, it has hills and mountains that overlook the narrow channel below. From these heights, some of the largest ships on Earth pass through the narrow channel below. These elevated areas create natural vantage points for radar systems, surveillance equipment, and missile launch sites. Iran is effectively sitting on a natural watchtower above the strait. From these heights, the nation's forces can monitor traffic moving through the strait with remarkable clarity. But the real advantage becomes clear once ships actually enter the strait. Out in the open ocean, powerful navies have enormous freedom of movement. Warships can maneuver across vast distances, constantly changing position and keeping threats far away. But inside the narrow corridor of the strait, ships lose much of that freedom. Their routes become predictable. Their room to maneuver shrinks dramatically, and every vessel moving through the strait is forced to follow the same narrow shipping lanes. In effect, the ships are funneled into a predictable path. Iran doesn't need to search for ships across thousands of kilometers of ocean. All it has to do is wait. Once they have the target, they could then activate those launchers concealed among mountains and rocky terrain. Once a missile is fired, the ships below have very little room to escape. In such a narrow passage, even the most advanced warships would struggle to maneuver. But Iran's coastline is only half the story. Because inside the Strait of Hormuz itself, Iran controls several islands positioned right beside the shipping lanes. In effect, these islands function like forward outposts, sitting in the middle of one of the world's most important energy routes. More than these physical advantages, the geography changes the rules of naval warfare in this strait. Because of the narrow waters and rugged coastline, Iran need not try to match the massive fleets of major naval powers. Instead, it uses what analysts call an asymmetric strategy. Iran focuses on smaller, cheaper systems that are far more effective in tight waterways like the Strait of Hormuz. Fast attack boats are a good example. These small vessels can move quickly through the shallow waters of the Gulf and approach larger ships in coordinated groups. A single boat may not pose much of a threat, but when many of them swarm together, even large warships can struggle to deal with them. But Iran's strategy does not rely on weapons alone. There is another factor that works strongly in its favor: psychology. Iran does not actually need to defeat the United States Navy in a traditional battle. Instead, its real objective is much simpler. It only needs to create enough uncertainty that shipping companies begin to hesitate. In other words, Iran does not need full control of the Strait of Hormuz to disrupt it. Sometimes creating fear is already enough. And in that sense, Iran may have already achieved what it set out to do. In the first few days of the conflict, traffic through the normally busy Strait of Hormuz quickly began to thin out. The reason was simple. Insurance companies and shipping operators began to see the route as too risky. Many concluded it was no longer safe to pass through the strait's narrow, winding waterway. Finally, The hold of Iran on this vital waterway would remain until a much potent alternative will be found. The Gulf states has long searched for a way around it. Pipelines were the first answer. Saudi Arabia redirected oil west toward the Red Sea, while the UAE built a route to Fujairah to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. At first glance, these seemed like a way out, but the limits quickly became clear. Pipelines can only carry so much, and much of their capacity is already in use. What's left cannot come close to replacing the vast volume that normally flows through the strait. So more bold proposals have emerged. If pipelines weren't enough, then something far more ambitious was needed. Saudi Arabia began exploring the idea of a massive man-made canal. More than a simple shortcut, it would be a sweeping waterway that would carve across an entire region. This megastructure would be known as the Salman Canal. The proposed route would stretch nearly 950 kilometers, almost 5 times longer than the Suez Canal. It would connect the Arabian Gulf directly to the Arabian Sea, crossing about 630 kilometers of Saudi Arabia and another 320 through Yemen. The goal was clear: redirect ships south and dramatically shorten their journey. But the reality proved overwhelming. The canal alone is estimated to cost between $80 and $100 billion. Once ports, economic zones, and supporting infrastructure are added, the total could soar to $250 billion. And the cost isn't the only barrier. The terrain itself is unforgiving, requiring engineers to carve through solid rock, cut across elevated ground, and reshape ridgelines that have stood for millions of years. For now, the vision remains just that, a concept. So it goes without saying that Iran would continue to enjoy its strategic advantage in this vital choke point in the foreseeable future. Everything has changed in the Strait of Hormuz. The question now is whether any force can truly neutralize a weapon that never needs to be fired.